Good morning. The last time I stood on a TEDx stage, I was a speaker. Today, I'm proud to stand before you as the organizer for the first ever edition of TEDxTDV. Our vision is to bridge the gap of making design thinking accessible to all. And what better way than a platform that is plural, compact, and meant to give a voice to those ideas worth sharing. Today, we stand before 100 participants with 13 ideas to share, all accumulating to a single theme. The start of the next design decade of TDV manifests in our theme for today, defining change. We live in a world that is in constant momentum, making change the only constant. This change manifests within all domains of design, and it is in its pursuit of defining these phenomena that we believe true impact can be created. We welcome you to explore the facets of change, from the seismic to the subtle, from the collective to the personal. Now I call upon stage our moderator for today, Kriti Rakheja, to take this forward.
Good morning everyone and welcome to the first edition of TEDxTDV. Before we dive into the enriching talks lined up for today, a gentle reminder, please we would request you not to leave the seats during the speeches. If you need to exit the auditorium, please wait for a speech to end or preferably during the break. Thank you. Our first speaker speaks 6 languages yet is often lost in thought. His journey in education has come a long way. From watching his mother make teaching aids for first standard kids, to playing the role of a teacher every year on Teachers' Day, to teaching his classmates during his architecture education, to becoming a tenured associate professor at SEPT University in Ahmedabad. After about 10 years of teaching, he realized more than students, teachers are in the need of education. And of late, he is tinkering with the education of society at large. We are pleased to welcome Vishwanath Kashikar on stage.
Hi everyone. With a show of hands, how many of you have seen these images from Dubai last month? Oh, I see a few. Okay, how many of you have seen these reports from Bangalore in the past few months? Oh, many more. And how many of you have experienced the Delhi smog? Well, that's pretty much everyone in the audience. So the environment seems to be faring very badly in the recent past. We are in the middle of an ecological crisis. Maybe this is collateral damage to achieve a better society. But are we doing any better on that front? Road rage is on the rise. Eve teasing is rampant. I'm sure that each one of you would like to add more to this list. It seems we are also in the middle of a social crisis. And yet, I'm here to tell you why you should not try and stop society from where it's headed. And to understand why I'm saying this, we'll have to get into some physics. We'll have to refresh some formulae and equations, so please bear with me. And of particular importance to us is the equation of momentum. P, for those of you who have forgotten, stands for momentum, M for mass, and V for velocity. In physics, velocity implies both speed and direction. Keep this in mind because it will be useful shortly. Let me delve deeper into momentum by sharing some examples. A mid-sized cargo ship like this one weighs about 120,000 tons and travels at a stately speed of 30 kilometers an hour. Though it is traveling very slowly, its mass gives it huge momentum. Traveling at this speed, our cargo ship requires 15 kilometers to come to a standstill. If we apply the brakes here at Allianz in New Delhi, it will stop all the way at Allianz in TDV Noida. On the other hand, let us look at this satellite orbiting Earth. Mid-sized satellites weigh about 0.6 tons, way smaller than our ship, but they travel at 28,000 kilometers an hour, which gives it huge momentum. If you try and stand in its way, you'll simply be blown to pieces. So both the ship and satellite have high momentum and are difficult to stop. Society is also in motion. Do you get where I'm going with this? Society is also in motion. It too has momentum. Let us calculate it, shall we? Consider India with 1.4 billion population and average mass of 50 kilograms per person. Actually, I was tempted to take the rotational speed of Earth, but even with a speed of 10 kilometers an hour, we arrive at mind-boggling numbers for societal momentum. The momentum of the ship and the satellite pale in comparison to societal momentum. Now, who will stop this society? We will either be brushed aside or simply destroyed. And remember, I talked of velocity as both speed and direction. Not only do we have a huge momentum going on, but it also seems to be heading in the wrong direction. Instead of heading towards more empathy, optimism, open-mindedness, resilience, altruism, consolidation, and focus, we seem to be heading towards apathy, pessimism, prejudice, fragility, selfishness, dispersal, and distraction. Is there no hope then? Are we all doomed? Should we just accept our fate? Of course not. As always, a good idea comes to our rescue. Presenting the trim tabs. What are trim tabs, you ask? Let us understand this using a modern passenger jet. The engines of the jet produce thrust. Without thrust, the plane cannot fly. The engines contribute to the speed component of velocity. And the wings produce lift, which along with the thrust produced by the engines allows the plane to defy gravity. The wings have movable surfaces that are collectively called, you guessed it right, trim tabs. They are the ailerons, the rudder, and the elevator. Trim tabs are used to change the direction of the plane. They provide the directional component of velocity. So when the plane is flying at 900 kilometers an hour, the still wind outside the plane is perceived as headwinds by the plane and those sitting inside it. But they work only when the plane is traveling at great speed. They work only if the trim tabs are attached to the plane. So remember our cargo ship, which took 15 kilometers to come to a standstill all the way in Noida? It can be turned around 180 degrees in less than half a kilometer using a trim tab. Isn't this fascinating? So all we need to do is identify the strongest headwinds in society and use its own forces to bring about change. This is a very counterintuitive response. And I'm not the first person to talk about trim tabs. Buckminster Fuller has famously said, "Call me a trim tab." Malcolm Gladwell and Margaret Mead have both talked of small actions having huge impact. But they all talk of individual actions. They consider each of us to be a trim tab. In effect, they are saying that if each one of us save one drop of water a day, humanity will save for 400,000 liters of water daily. But I want to look at it differently. I argue that if society is moving towards desiring more comfort, more convenience, more consumption and polarization, in other words, if these are the headwinds, let us use these forces to bring about positive change rather than trying to nudge people towards less comfort, less convenience, less consumption and so on. So in other words, when I see that my kids are attracted to the internet on the phone, I don't stop them from using the phone. I use that very own attraction for a positive outcome. When I see that students are unable to focus because they are distracted, I start thinking of a pedagogy of distraction. When relatives in my WhatsApp group take a hardline religious position, I like to use the same religious scriptures to counter them. When colleagues at my university are apprehensive about the role of artificial intelligence in education, I talk of the importance of apprehension in education. You see what I did there? I don't talk of the positives of artificial intelligence. I rather talk of the role of apprehension in education. Now, all of these are ideas. Ideas are hazy, they are not solutions. But ideas force us to be creative. And as I see around in this audience, I see a lot of creative and intelligent people who can take this idea much further than me. All I wish to do is plant a germ of idea in all of you. And this, my friends, is why I propose that we do not try and stop society from where it's heading. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is a growth strategist in the higher education sector, trained as an architect and a city planner, who started his professional journey as an educator and then transitioned to management and marketing. He deploys cross disciplinary thinking, a user centric mindset, and data driven approach in all his projects. A thinker who firmly believes in mapping the field before the play begins. He is always seen occupied figuring out the whys, the whens, the hows, and the ifs. We now welcome Sagar Gupta on the stage.
If you were to take an investment opinion from me today, I would say build a university. It is one of those few sectors in India where your consumer pays upfront, investing a ticket size of one of the biggest purchases they would ever make in their lifetime, and in return expect zero liability. As good as setting up a healthcare center that does not deal with tangible, measurable damage. Let me elaborate. When you admit yourself in a healthcare center, you make an upfront payment and sign a liability waiver. Without that, you just can't get in. It's a liability waiver, a legally admissible document at the government's judiciary. Admitting yourself at a higher ed institution, very similar. You cannot get in without paying their fee. And the liability waiver is just an unsigned existence. So one must pay their fee, come to the classroom, and hope for a successful education at their institution. If the institution doesn't train well, then you have to leave silent, similar to the rare exit of hospitals, and there is no liability waiver you sign to take to the government. One key difference we must not miss is that between these two industries, a consumer goes to a hospital when in critical need, giving a hospital no choice and enough reason to waive off their liability because they did not select their consumer. But higher education is a consumer's and university's mutual choice, expressed by an application and subsequent selection, endorsement from the government as a recognized qualification. The unsigned liability waiver in higher ed, in a country like India, where over 2/3 of university enrollments are first generation college students, a country where only 1 of 10 people have ever gone to a higher education institutions, puts at stake a young individual's dreams, a guardian's lifelong savings, and at most times, society's trust in it. I am a higher ed growth strategist who was introduced to the business of higher education 10 years back. Since then, the sector has intrigued me, the business model has fascinated me, and as luck would have it, higher ed institutions have offered me work in different capacities. I often ponder, why is the government, our institutions, our industry so unconcerned, so unaccountable towards unemployment of the educated? What if universities had to offer services like Amazon and the government had to set up a refund policy? When a graduate doesn't meet industry expectations, they would be eligible for refunds. What if a university graduate, as an educated young citizen, had twice the weightage for their vote? What if the industry had to compulsorily recruit a minimum number of fresh graduates from institutions in their job? Would universities, our industry, and our government still be so unconcerned, still behave so unaccountable towards graduate unemployment? What has been happening with the higher ed sector of India probably seems to be very similar to what happened at my home last Sunday. I was out buying groceries. Our house help, who cooks for us, and I don't find enough time to discuss the grocery needs. So hence my wife is the one who moderates this purchase list. Now last Sunday, she stepped out with a few of her friends, and I started my usual Sunday with a clear intent to tick off all tasks on my task list as soon as possible. So without checking what was in the refrigerator, what was cooked that morning, I went shopping and came back with 2 kilograms of cauliflower. That wasn't a problem. That wasn't even worry. But what our help did is, the 3.5 kilograms of cauliflower now in our home was consumed in various ways. Gobi parathas that were already prepared for breakfast. Last evening's aloo gobi leftovers for lunch. Cauliflower soup in Monday's dinner. Gobi keema for Wednesday lunch. And because we were all so fed up with cauliflower, the remaining more than a kilogram finally landed in the garbage bin on Thursday. Yesterday evening, some friends were home and we were discussing food scarcity in India over alcohol. I feel this household activity and the higher education sector have so much in similar. The government, industry, and institutions have been busy, not finding an opportunity to talk to each other, putting our students at stake, without realizing the graduate unemployment crisis the country goes through. The institutions have been purely talking about their business goals, the industry just unconcerned even when they have no appetite to absorb graduates, and the government failing to moderate the conversation between the demand and supply agents. pick up a relevant editorial and you will find all these stakeholders talking about this topic on educated unemployment. Was the Indian higher education sector always so unconcerned? No, there is no evidence of that kind. In fact, India's most successful, globally acknowledged institutions are an evidence of a robust alignment between government, industry and academia. IITs, for instance, India's premier technology institutes, were conceptualized in the pre-independence era by Sir Dalal, who foresaw that technology will be the backbone of India's prosperity in the years to come. IIMs, the prestigious B schools, were proposed by the Planning Commission in 1950s to train professionals who could manage public sector enterprises being established under India's industrial policy. The NID was built on the recommendations of the Eames report of 1956 that advocated setting up of an indigenous design legacy balancing tradition and modernity for a modern India. It is just impossible to miss the supply and demand relationship in these three success stories. Impossible to miss the decisiveness of the government, the social accountability our institutions used to take up, and the opportunity that the industry would always offer. Impossible to miss the common goal all these three stakeholders had for society. The academia was creating fit graduates to the industry, and the industry had enough appetite to absorb. One who was educated had enough opportunity to be employed because the opportunity was envisioned before the institution was. Compare the first 2 decades after independence with the most recent two, and you will realize that the number of higher ed institutions in India have multiplied, but so has the educated unemployment. Look at the next two, and you will find that our national education policy is targeting to double the higher ed enrollment. This is the basic misalignment behind our nation's modern graduate unemployment dilemma, causing us to stand at a junction where 50% of Indian graduates are seen as unemployable against the roles they seek. When we continuously emphasize on the quality of education provided by IITs, IIMs and NIDs, we miss appreciating the vision behind the establishment of these schools, the supply and demand relationship, and the presence of a fine mix that was moderated very intentionally. A mix that John Maynard Keynes, father of modern macroeconomics, talked about in 1936 in his endeavor to show that capitalist economies with their decentralized market system do not automatically generate full employment, and that governments, institutions and industries need to pitch in, deliberately pursuing stabilization policies. Learning from last Sunday, my wife and I, when we go back home today, plan to meet our help. Once we reach, we can discuss our grocery requirement, together figure out the possible end dish, together aiming to consume from STEM. Collaborate to bridge the gap between what we want and what's available in stock. Collaboratively bring back the end outcome in the process, balance supply and demand, assume accountability and responsibility in this weekly household job. The idea of a successful collaboration induced by a simple conversation intended to achieve a finely moderated mix between the three of us is what I call a trilogue. A trilogue between government, institutions and industry. A trilogue to co-create an equilibrium between what institutions produce and industry absorbs. A trilogue to co-create an ecosystem where the three key decision makers, the key stakeholders are accountable. A trilogue to co-create responsibility and stake in the employment of our young graduates. A trilogue to co-create safety net for our society to battle both food insecurity and unemployment. Circling back to where I started this conversation, a trilogue to co-create education and employment.
Thank you so much, Sagar. I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, who is perpetually engaged in observing, making correlations, introspecting, and discovering eureka moments in all of these experiences. She constructs built and unbuilt environments and then deconstructs contexts. She advocates and practices partial self-sufficiency in energy and food resources and thrives on doing tightrope walking between the empirical and the esoteric, the big picture and the cellular. An avid reader, a compulsive writer, and an incessant traveler, she lives her brand. We are proud to have Leena Gupta on stage.
I thought iconic, and I imagined an emblem, an idol having heroic capabilities worthy of veneration. A person having a virtue as attitude, courage, perseverance, spirituality. I thought iconic and I imagined remarkability and extraordinariness. The Webster Dictionary agrees with me in defining iconic as that which is well established, widely acknowledged, and known for its distinctive excellence. Therefore, the notion of iconic design is somehow nestled in its being different from just design. But what if its value lies in not being different? Iconic design is believed to have the aura of standing out in a crowd. Rather than that which stands out in the crowd, what if it is the crowd that stands out? In his book, Not Interesting, on the limits of criticism in architecture, Berkeley professor Andrew Atwood positioned architecture to an alternative terms to interesting. Today, I also choose not to focus on the interesting and the attention-seeking, but on the not so interesting, the ordinary and the ubiquitous. Because in doing so, I firmly believe that we might become more open to novel but pertinent ways of reading built environments and also critically examining the conventional ways of doing so. I say it's time to add to the predominantly Western nomenclatural lens of defining iconicity, because typically this adjective gets attached to museal objects. And these museal objects are typically exclusive, inaccessible to be viewed in or consecrated and therefore dehumanized. What if the alternative iconicity prefers to sit in its original ethnographic field, replete with people and narratives, contexts and lived experiences? What if we draw knowledge from subaltern perspectives? After all, pluriverse is all about multiple interconnected worlds coexisting. In this anthropocentric age, we are becoming more and more conscious of incorporating indigenous wisdom in a last bid effort to resuscitate the earth through regenerative systems. Iconicity is inspiring. So I argue for incorporating this alternative iconicity along with Eurocentric modernist ideals for design thinking in praxis and education. I place before you the case of the charcoal, an ubiquitous, traditional, handcrafted daybed commonly found in many parts of the Indian subcontinent, particularly in the alluvial plains and the arid parts of North India. Simply made from 4 posts, a rectangular frame and sporting a mat-like woven surface, it is a classic example of non-pedigreed design. Prima facie, it is just a piece of furniture to sleep on, and it is DIY. But it is also CIY. Carry it yourself and repair it yourself, RIY. Versatility, it supports a multitude of functions that are derived from common sense and the utterly bizarre. Using it to dry clothes and condiments, understandable. But using it to rescue children and leopards that fall accidentally into wells? The charpai continues its narrative from that very courtyard and that very house where generations come and generations pass on. An individual takes life on it in villages, and an individual leaves life on it and actually carried on it for the last rites. And somewhere in between, it nurtures childhood and marks the institution of marriage. For it quite literally and allegorically facilitates the paradigm shift for many brides in North Indian villages, because it is on the charpai that her belongings, artifacts and memories are carried along with her to her new household. Breaking social barriers, the charpai has found its way to places where its makers have not yet and might never. In the pastoral commons, we see elders, we call them the panchayat, commonly seated on the charpai and dispensing justice, their version of justice. That apart, both are signifiers of their position in the village. And you know what? The charpai can magically hold the great Indian extended family, and you can imagine it. However, it is also a safe space for women in remote villages to unburden themselves. The charpai spells abundance, accessibility. It is of the people, by the people, for the people. It's democratic and it's inclusive. Soon after independence, sometime in the 1950s, the government of India invited the Eames couple, Charles and Ray, to visit India and carry out an investigation into those qualities and values that Indians held important in their lives. And they discovered the ubiquitous lota, a clay pot, and they called it the greatest, most beautiful object that they had seen and admired during their visit. And thereafter, in the India Design Report of 1958, it was the reinvention of the lota that established new paradigms for design in the new country. But for generations of Indians, The disruption from ancient ways of life during foreign invasions had already created a tabula rasa. And many more generations were schooled in modern consciousness during colonization and thereafter because of its vestiges. So for many, many people, these ancient ways of life were mere stories of the past with little relevance to present times. And yet, at some level, these ways of life are not obsolete. They are very much in vogue, so why not bring them to the level of Indian consciousness? Could they not, should they not inform the modern Indian designer? 75 years of our nation state have been built on a layered history of thousands of years of a civilization. And ubiquity over millennia has been recognized eminently by the people of the subcontinent, and they continue to do so. In design language, we call it timelessness. So, while the contemporary Indian designer is still trying the tightrope walking between addressing needs of affluence and development, still searching for an identity in the new millennium, the Charpai has done the balancing act, found its identity, and continues to be as resilient as the civilization it exemplifies. So, now I think iconic, I think ubiquity, and I imagine the Charpai. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leena ma'am. The next item on the agenda is the performance with an intent to express. The profound one can experience in everyday place of work and learning, or the subliminal nature of being a community bringing in its stakeholders. The process involved allows for intuitive moments. On this music piece by Abhi Sampa and Rushil Bhatnagar, in a time where we began digesting the idea of being back in a shared space post-pandemic in an attempt to express what the village holds. Is an educational design strategist. She works with experiential and experiment strategies within educational, environmental, and social systems, dabbling with a variety of scales and approaches. Working in the capacity of a creative leader with an array of organizations and responsive design collectives, she is carving a rather atypical image of a pedagogue tinkering with diverse mediums of awareness, actions, and learnings. An advocate for decentralized musological experiences, she is a gatherer at heart, often most comfortable in keenly observing people, ideas, and spaces, contemplating, curating, and gathering for life. We are honored to present Mudita Pasari on the stage.
Hi everyone. It is illegal to bring back rocks and sand from beaches in the UK. It is in fact illegal to pick rocks and sand from beaches in the UK. It is also illegal to pick sand in many parts of the United States, Australia, Canada, etc. As per the Bureau of Land Management in the United States of America, collection of rocks and gems is limited to a reasonable amount. I'm forced to wonder, what is a reasonable amount? Where do we stop? I'm sure you're wondering, why do I care and how is all of this connected to me personally? Okay. You and I in this room are of course connected to the gory history of our collective colonial past. But beyond that, who am I and why do I care? I have been a gatherer of natural artifacts from across the world since 2016. And this form of knowledge creation and bringing some small samples of learning to people in India has been an endeavor close to my heart. I am also an educator and strategist who is constantly confronted with multiple colonial vestiges in our everyday systems. I am a defier of absolutes because I believe in the spaces in between and finding solutions in areas we assumed there could be none. Let me tell you a story. My maternal great-grandfather was an engineer during the Raj. and I'm aware that my correct command on this language that I use today has been handed down as part of my inheritance. Apart from the language, I have been gifted with education. I am told my great-great-grandfather was a primary school teacher in Kandla, a mere 100 kilometers from where we sit. And I am humbled by the cascading effect for the love of knowledge. With knowledge comes great responsibility. And as I stand here today, talking about an idea, hopefully worth sharing, I acknowledge my heritage and my responsibility. English as a language was part of the colonizers' oppressive regime. It was a way to divide those with access from those without. When India achieved independence, strangely, our founding fathers and mothers could not agree on a national language. We had official ones, which to this day are accepted. At this moment, English, a language of oppression, became a language of connection, a language of communication across a subcontinent with diversity. Over time, command of a language such as this became an elevator in society, creating newer class systems. With elevation came hierarchy and oppression once more. In paradigms of judgment, of questioning, of wondering, are we good enough if we do not speak the colonizer's language? And maybe now people like you and I are propagators of the division left behind as a spear in our collective colonial past, an alienator which may not be taking the real country with it. Are you and I getting a little too comfortable in our own skin? As described by Howie, we as a nation are being torn between local traditions and global modernity, and of course, our need for national unison. Anyhow, on my paternal side, I come from a long lineage of traders. Even today, most businesses are conducted in Marwari, a language imported from western part of India to Assam, which is in the far northeast. Why, you ask? To keep our secrets close to our hearts. During the project in ethnographic research, I met Lalaji, the owner of a trade store in Kargil, Ladakh in 2015. He showed us his Bahi Khata, his book of accounts, and he told us that this book doesn't use a known language, but rather an amalgamation of scripts to keep their notes secret and only legible to traders. Does this sound familiar to you? Isn't this what we have done to most of our signages on roads, to our medicines, to our official documents that are either found in Hindi or English? I built Setu as a non-absolute, in-between bridge script to make this experience more obvious for you and I, who assume English is the primary medium of sophisticated communication. For once, if we didn't know where we were going or where we were in our very own country. Apart from doing critical and participatory design work, such as designing pseudo scripts and games which when played force us to confront our privileges, I am a tinkerer of systems. One such playing field has been my experience with educational systems at the Design Village. With friends, colleagues, and colleagues who have become friends, we work to reimagine what would it be like to be educated in the design field today. We question the norm, we question ourselves questioning the norm, and we envision the future, coming up with strategies to achieve our goals. One such endeavor has been to question absolute Western ideas of numbered grading. When we start to ask, what will help a learner learn, rather than how can we teach, we see flipped models on how to grade, how to articulate, and how to learn. But most of all, beyond all these day jobs and experiments, I am a gatherer. I am a gatherer of ideas, experiences, and mostly natural artifacts from across the world. Some might say Gathering is just a polite word for stealing. But haven't our ancestors gathered for eternity? To fill our basic needs, to feed, and to find beauty in the world. Can nature truly be stolen if it doesn't belong to any single one of us? Beyond this debate, I am a regulated gatherer for sure. Or if you still insist, a stealer. But mind you, I'm not a robber. I only take one specimen of a kind, which is endemic to the surroundings. I do not pluck or plunder, just gather. Pick up what I find, if I find anything at all. Each micro-museum I curate is an experience set in time, season, geography, and each container's size, never to be replicated. While I call this a museum today, I have always wondered if it is a museum at all, or a version of the Sangrahalaya, an archive, a storage home of a collection, which chooses not to preserve artificially, keeping collections safe for as long as we can, knowing they will return to dust as they were meant to. Meanwhile, creating spaces of learning for all who are keen to see a museum and the world break its white cube and come to our doorstep. To sum up, I usually aim to design artifacts and systems to challenge the status quo, most of which I've realized circle back to ideas of coloniality and occupation of the human mind. Lee Bianco's model of nationing clearly talks about this, where to me, language is just an example and it can be replaced by any social system we like. We often talk about settler or trader colonialism from outside continents or nations. But what we forget to acknowledge is that colonialism is a power dynamic. You and I, seated in this room, are internal colonialists. We have created a subculture propagated by language, by education, by mediums, which, as per Forbes, over 2/3 of our country cannot access. The proportion could easily be warped, for so many cannot even access the surveys that help us collect this data. However, I just want to remind you that it is illegal to bring back rocks and sand from beaches in the UK. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mudita. A visual communication strategist. Our next speaker is a quintessential storyteller, weaving compelling narratives through design. Specializing in visual brand design, he is captivated by the intangible nature of branding and its profound impact on individuals, and has honed his expertise in crafting compelling brand identities. With a diverse portfolio, he has collaborated with brands such as Ducati, Cartel, and Barilla. His keen interest in craft and community development drives his research efforts, exploring the dynamics of global communities. We are pleased to welcome Souvik Mukherjee on the stage.
Why do we call ourselves facilitators? Imagine a world where every community has the power to shape its own destiny, where creativity and collaboration thrive, and designers don't thrust upon changes, but act as facilitators of empowerment. But you must be thinking, isn't that what's already happening? Do we not do that exactly right now? Why is he on the stage? What is he going to talk about? Around 37,000 members of the Apatani tribe live in the Zero Valley in the northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh. The Apatani women were once famous for having bold facial tattoos, big earplugs, and nose plugs. But unfortunately, this practice has declined ever since the community opened its doors to the outside world in the 1940s. The elders in the community complain about ever since they opened their doors, the newer generations are losing touch with their cultures and traditions. With the blind remodeling of the area and the acculturation of the community, the indigenous people started letting go of their living traditions. For the Apatanis, the nose plugs, the earplugs, and the facial tattoos were once considered beautiful. But in the 70s, these practices were banned in the name of modernization and the stigmas they created around them, thus losing an essential part of their culture. Of course, these changes came intrinsic to the community, but they were forced to do so because of the discrimination they were facing when they moved out to the outside world. Is this what the new world making is about? Sure, there is development, but at what cost? In our rapidly evolving society, traditional notions of design are undergoing a profound change. No longer confined to the realms of aesthetics, design now encompasses a broader mandate to address complex societal changes. Take Superk Island, for example. It is a half-a-mile-long urban space wedged into one of the most ethnically diverse and socially challenged spaces in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's got one overarching idea that is seen as an exhibition of urban best practice. A sort of collection of globally found objects from over 60 different nationalities of the people who live and inhabit the area surrounding it. It's the surrealist assembly of global urban diversity, which in fact reflects the true nature of the neighborhood rather than perpetuating a homogeneous image of what Copenhagen is or what Denmark is. Design plays an important role in the modern society, so not only protidal functions, but also social functions. They create objects and designs, but also they create the hidden affordances, which often have a subtext or a cultural meaning shadowing them. Why do you think this happens? This mainly happens when a designer is designing in a different societal context than the one they're creating for. But what gives them the right? I'm sure everyone present here has their own way of life, a small world you have built inside your homes. Now imagine somebody coming inside your house and starts clicking photographs without permission and goes out to publish that. They go so far to suggest changes and say the way you are living your life is not the most optimal way, and then you should make changes door to doors begging for alms while he unfolded the scroll and was singing the song associated to it. Women were not allowed to paint. Their role was usually confined to making the paints which they were made from locally sourced materials. Swarna decided to break free. For her, Pattachitra was not just a mode of art, but a means of freedom. Freedom from social shackles and taboos. Freedom to paint and sing. Freedom to travel, and of course, freedom from living in the shadows of the men in her society. Swarna, now in her late 40s, has bagged the state level award in 1994. Over the last 2 decades, she has been critically acclaimed not only across India but throughout the world. Till the summer of 2018, she had travelled to the States 5 times, to the UK twice, along with other European countries like Italy, Germany and France. Not only to take part in artistic residencies and showcase her work, but also to collaborate with other artists from across the world. Swarna is now fighting a new battle. Despite breaking free from the traditional notions, she battles with researchers, designers, artists who have come into her village, who have come into her house and taken photographs of her work and published it, all without asking for a single ounce of permission. They have gone so far to suggest changes, saying that you have to do certain things so that your society is developed, so that you can grow your art. But this is where I want to take a stand. As a designer from an urban context, I don't know the struggles she went through to reach where she is today, how the men in her village reacted when she picked up the brush. I haven't spoken to her, I don't know anything about her. Then how can I even assume that they need changes or they need designers to intervene? The craftspeople or anyone from any community are not tools to reach a goal. True change would only come if the people who actually live and suffer the problems come up with the solutions themselves. And I want to pledge myself to the cause that as a designer, it is not my role to infiltrate, but to facilitate. I don't blatantly take decisions on their behalf, but just try to understand if the society needs any form of intervention at all. Only then can we work towards a new world making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shobhik. Our next speaker is a final year fashion and textile student. For the past few years, she has dedicated herself to be a conscious designer, committed to integrate mindful practices into her jobs and routines. Recently, she has discovered her interest in working as a textile person within the context of healthcare mainstream practices, allowing her to serve the textile's functional purposes. Her approach to design is deeply rooted in origins, narratives, and processes. We are pleased to welcome Akshata Maheshwari on the stage.
You know, on an average, each one of us is wearing at least 4 different types of textiles as clothing. And that is what unites us all, It's our reliance on textiles as clothing. Textiles impact almost every aspect of our life, from our toothbrush bristles to our shoelaces. Textiles are genuinely everywhere. And over the period of time, the meaning of textiles as clothing has evolved from being just a physical safeguard to a body to a means of self-expression and a means of establishing an identity. From the moment of birth, even before we were held by our mothers, we were held by textiles in forms of wraps and towels for the comfort and for the respect. To the ritual surrounding death, where textiles represent modesty and dignity to the deceased person. Their significance is undeniable. And I can surely say that you would never feel weird with textiles on, but you can definitely feel weird without them. Paola Antonelli, an architect and curator, quotes, "There is nothing closer to the Big Bang of design, to its prime reason to exist, than the objects that deal with self-preservation." And this aptly states that the objects that deal with self-preservation and human survival are at the heart of design's purpose. When we mix these two concepts together, we are introduced with textiles in healthcare, which are largely known as medical textiles. While many of you are unfamiliar with this term, but this as a concept has been around since thousands of years. The first evidence was found in Egyptian tombs around 6,000 years ago, now known as a textile linen. The Egyptian used linen bandages to wrap mummies and for wound dressings. And even after all these years, every first aid box in every household would at least contain such bandages. Thousands of years have passed away, and people around the globe have realized the potential of textiles in healthcare. It is a domain that reiterated the patient experience, redefined the concept of healing, and extended its reach beyond the confines of hospitals into our daily activities. This domain brings healthcare from hospital to home where people would rather be. And it is just not about addressing practical needs. This seamless intertwinedness of textiles and healthcare makes healing a more holistic and a comfortable process. The essence of medical textiles lies in the simplicity and familiarity, by avoiding alien materials and embracing textiles that we encounter in our daily activities. These textiles transforms an otherwise clinical, impersonal environment into a space of comfort and care. Now imagine a parallel universe where you are not afraid to go to hospitals, where you are not afraid of poking needles, where you don't have to experience the unpleasant smell of cleaning detergents, where the treatment is as light on your skin as clothes you would usually wear. This is what these textiles aim for. Central to the ethos of medical textiles is a commitment to human-centered design. By prioritizing the patient's experience, designers, scientists, doctors around the globe are reimagining healthcare environments as spaces of comfort and empathy. And one of the most transformative aspects of these textiles is that they foster a sense of agency and dignity among patients. Rather than being just a passive recipients of care, patients are now encouraged and empowered to be a part of their healing journey. Nowadays, people are so busy in their life, they are so busy in their hustle-bustle routines. What makes them not to go to hospital, or what stops them to recover fastly, is that they have to break their routine. They have to eat food alone. They don't want to be away from their work, they don't want to be away from their office. And from personal experiences, I have realized a familiar environment gives energy to the patient to recover faster. On the similar note, individual independence boosts happiness, prevents stress, ultimately leading to a faster recovery. And I even started sort of watching medical documentaries to see how treatments happens in real life, so that I as a textile designer can stimulate those treatments through textile driven, non-invasive solutions. And to conclude that, I would like to say that it is just not about healing, it is just not about the treatment. It is about facilitating the feeling of being at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshita. A fashion enthusiast and a dreamer, our speaker has traversed the luxury industry over the last decade. Trained in made to measure by Xenia, pioneer of luxury menswear brand. He co-founded a personalized menswear brand, Udemon, a design aesthete, a storyteller, and a brand ontologist. Passionately weaving stories and narratives, he brings a multifaceted approach to brand building and communicating cultural chronicles. We are pleased to welcome Vatsal Agarwal on the stage.
Good morning, everyone. The great philosopher and faith creator, Gautam Buddha said, "In separateness lies the world's great mystery. In compassion lays the world's true strength." We are staged in a world so deeply immersed in geopolitical dissonance. Our dialects are hierarchical, and our pointed tools are slave keepers. Our weapon is mockery, and our victory is treachery. Behold, we are a progressive world, for progress promises supremacy of thoughts and actions, of numb conviviality, of prejudice, camaraderie. We are conditioned to believe that all that manifests about us in the multiverses of our incidental ordeal of living, day in and out. We are made to feel empathetic, triggered, depressed, regaled, and successful alike. One emotion that can never be invoked unnaturally is compassion. It is ignited with self and propagates from a pure seed of selflessness and suffering. Today I'm here to talk to you about the biggest tool in world making, that we the change makers, the thought leaders, visionaries of luminous futures do not give enough credence to, which is compassion. If only we can call it a tool, for it is the talisman for saving what is left of this world with grace, honor, and humility. The great Nelson Mandela once said, "Our human compassion binds us the one to the other, not in pity or patronizingly, but as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope for the future." It is often perceived that being compassionate or being involved in the action of compassion renders you soft as a leader or a preserver. However, on the contrary, compassion builds resilience, an astute focus, and an unconditional commitment to the work, the people, and the community in which we live and operate. Compassion doesn't come with terms and conditions. It exists incomprehensibly, showing us ways of the future that do not have world popularity and blessings of marketing movies. Nevertheless, these ways are absolute as they alleviate the current world of the burden it carries along with every passage of time. Leaders of the effervescent world, I watched Simon Sinek's talk on understanding empathy, and what truly struck me is this: everyone has the capacity to be a leader. Doesn't mean everybody should be a leader or wants to be a leader. Being a leader comes with a huge amount of self-sacrifice. Remember that you are not in charge. You are responsible for those in your charge. It takes every ounce of courage to stand amidst all of you and preach compassion. I am no Masiha and I've never wanted to be one. Yes, I am a custodian of compassion, and I unequivocally believe that everything that I've built around myself, my life, my people, my culture, my ambition, my failures and accomplishments, they all are my gifts to self, because they have come true through incessant periods of suffering and unconditional love. Yes, the progress has been slow but not timid. Wealth has been humble but not majestic. True intentions have been put to test but never questioned. I have led not as a leader but as a partner, a son, a brother, a colleague, a friend, and a member of this community that I strive with. Ever time since immemorial, compassion has always come to my rescue and it has never left my side. I am an extremely ambitious individual and my goals are set to the highest pinnacle. And yet, by dedicatedly working towards building a community together, moving as a collective, being an incubator of young people, I grow as my people grow. I do not have statistics to prove my growth, but I have many illustrious autobiographies seated within this auditorium who would share this joy of growth with me. My esteemed colleagues, guests, and my loved ones, as we build the world back from the intrusions of virtual mirages, let us move beyond empathy and fathom how compassion works in simplest forms of our lives. Remember, we were all born with it, our mother's unconditional love. Speaking of motherly love, I would like to quote an extract from the long forgotten poem. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. It was written by American author and poet with Scottish roots, William Ross Wallace in 1865, celebrating motherhood as the preeminent force to change the world. Woman, how divine your mission. Hereupon our needle sought. Keep the young heart open, always to the breath of God. All true trophies of the ages are from mother love impelled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Our birth is an involuntary act of compassion. Thus, its ability to love unconditionally innately resides within our souls. Over the years, as we grow wiser, if we want to believe so, this ability gets obscured with larger temptations of the world. But every day that one phone call from our mothers, one look at the photograph first thing in the morning, essential good mornings and good nights have rendered all of us compassionate. Further virtue to lead us to solving larger problems that exist in our everyday lives, which are very harmless. I am what I am because of what my mother made me. My first true principle of design. Pure joy, true story, heartwarming emotions, unfathomable amount of dedication, and an insurmountable passion to believe that I can create something and make it right. I am a breathing example of what my mother created, and 37 years later, she fills me with passion, rigor, and purity of intentions every single morning. My name, my identity, connotes her unconditional love. To give life an inanimate context, to make it an active inertia, gain momentum, and keep nurturing it for the tides that swell and recede, is what I truly believe is at the threshold of creating a brand, the extension of your mere DNA. Vairagya, a Sanskrit word finding its roots in Hindu mythology, describes the state of detachment or total renunciation of materialistic sense of being, and is associated with an ascetic way of living. And an alternate thought leader, Sadhguru, gives us a contemporary etymology of what color means. Vairagya, Rag means color and Vai means beyond. Vairagya means beyond color. You have become transparent. If you are in front of red, you turn red too. If what is behind you is blue, you are blue too. If what is behind you is yellow, you turn yellow too. You are unprejudiced. Wherever you are, you become a part of that, but nothing sticks to you. Only if you are like this, only if you are in the state of Vairagya, then you will dare to explore all dimensions of life when you live here. The second design principle I practice is compassion through color. Color stems from kolos in Latin, meaning to cover or conceal. Color has not been done through cascades of time as an act of covering up our modest forms alone, but has been referred to as humans, adopting multiple countenances and visages through our lives as well. Color has almost become a primal identity of origin, culture, habit, and habitat. We have learned to distinguish our varied skins and how they glow under the common sun. What if we decide to strip it all down, bare to nothing, and become one with our original form? Become aware of a state where all that is present but all is absent, where it is all converging into one and then again emanating into infinity, where all colors merge into one single whole, the all-inclusive light, the eighth color, Atvaram, which means the dimension of life which is beyond. Suffering with that purity, tone, depth, and consistency always evokes compassion and responsibility to start perceiving us souls as we always associate ourselves as a memory through the specific color. The connect is subliminal. My life is identified as a romance between mustard and indigo. As I draw to my close, I leave you with a memory which has transformed me as an individual, a designer, a thinker, and a practitioner of compassion. There exist innumerable marvels across the many continents and seas, some blessed by nature and others attempted by those rare visionaries who create with nature at their very core. It is in nature's undulating compassion towards the natives of the earth that a site named Thermivals could be conjured within the subliminal Alpine labs in the Graubünden canton in Switzerland by master architect Peter Sulzer. Built out of sheer toil, dignity and respect, layer upon layer in the locally quarried Balser quartzite slabs the thermal baths diminishes your ego to let it dawn that we exist as a leaf from the nature. Winds from the valley, soft tufts of the clouds dots the autumn sky, and you're left to wonder, all immersed in pure minerals from the spring that said, what is life if this blissful? What for there is compassion that thrives along, inexplicably and incessantly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vatsal. Since our technical issue has now been resolved, let me reintroduce the next item on the agenda. The performance with an intent to express, the profound one can experience in everyday place of work and learning, or the nature of being a community bringing in its stakeholders. The process involved allowing for intuitive moments on this music piece by Abhi Sampa and Rushal Bhatnagar in a time where we began digesting the idea of being back in a shared space post-pandemic in an attempt to express what the village holds. Please enjoy. Before we dive back into the enriching talks lined up for today, we would like to request you not to leave your seats during the speeches. If you wish to leave the auditorium, please wait for a speech to end or preferably during a break. Thank you. An architect turned visual artist and educator. She currently heads Impact and Strings Industry Collaboration and Exchange at the Design Village. With a continuing experience in curation and processes for silo-agnostic design education, she has been leading and mentoring projects across multidisciplinary design domains, curating design project briefs and processes to respond to real-world challenges. She runs a design cell and think tank housed within an academic institution, created and facilitated modules on image generation, spatial narratives, system and climate responsive design, participatory and high-impact social change projects, along with a peculiar interest in the methodologies for learnings that sit well with the real-time practices in the world. We are pleased to welcome Anusha Dhawan on the stage.
My heart is skipping a beat. I thought that would be a good sentence to test the mic. What you see on the screen right now is a pigeon, and this one's the drawing of a pigeon. This one's the image of a pigeon, but more like the pipe for some of you who get the context. And this one's the print image of a pigeon made with stamps made out of Tetra packs. This one's a metal pigeon, not the genre of music though. All of these are photographs from a material and mediums course that I facilitate for learners in the domains of graphics. The course is centered around discovering possibilities, allowances, and techniques with various mediums of drawing and mark making. While each pigeon is different and made by a different learner, it is also something that has come out of unique conversations with these learners. The idea of making beautiful things takes a backseat, and we all make pigeons in a medium that is assigned to us. Now, while some of us are critical learners and would like to know the formal application of what I am learning, some of us are more experience-driven individuals who do not need the whys, but choose to directly jump into the act of doing, going through the process and building their own rationale of what is. There are theorists, and I'm still talking about learners, who are compelled by the need to foresee mechanisms as scientifically as possible, deciding on a route to experiment. The years of repetition of this particular process has taught me why, as a facilitator, one needs to make all these diverse processes happen in a classroom.
The how of it is something that I have learned by being an artist. And the slides should move. This is where I become the artist. Through the past few years of picking up drawing as an instinctive act of subjective mapping, I'm on a journey unpacking these thought-blurting mechanisms more from a personal lens. When I fold paper or scribble with a pen, take a piece of charcoal or a piece of beetroot to draw, or impress on a dusty car window pane, all intended to make as an act of drawing, I see the relationship that is then forming. The relationship with the material at hand, the surfaces, the space that we jointly occupy, and more. Hitting the pen on the surface of the paper will probably not give me anything to work with. And we all do this, rather unknowingly, on an everyday basis, whether or not as an artist. Unknown to how I need to hold a pencil to write, unknown to why a pencil is a good tool, unknown to why a piece of potato is not for drawing, unknown to why I should see what I am drawing, I make in ways a child does, and so do those who join me in this particular experiment. These intuitive experiences also teach us about the way we see learning, education, or collaboration, all mark-making experiences of their own kind. These experiences are idiosyncratic, peculiar, quirk-like. They happen between individuals. They cumulatively facilitate learning and capacity building. Now, whether we look at simplistic fundamentals of successful communication for all those who have studied models of communication, or at inexplicably diverse phenomena in nature, the human world has patterns or similarities but lacks sameness. We do not step into the same river twice. I'm using a borrowed idea here. And as an educator, each interaction is like entering the river. New each time you enter, only if we are keen enough to observe. I'll take another step, another dive into this. There are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combinations of these 5 give rise to more melodies that can ever be heard. There are not more than 5 primary colors, yet in combination, they produce more hues that can ever be practically seen. There are not more than 5 cardinal tastes, yet combination of them yield more flavors than can ever be tasted. I'm quoting Sun Tzu here, if that convinces some of us more, because we have to back what we're saying. Now scale this up to a classroom and a learning community, and the process becomes more apparent and enjoyable. In communities that thrive on shared learning experiences, where codependencies are like the fundamental thing, witnessing with compassion makes humans more human-like. Now, education for creative disciplines, or creatively looking at education, requires one to look at the mediums of learning and the learners as unique relationships that may have sameness, but they are never same. Learning is a process of discovery first, and these discoveries requires teachers to be facilitators of idiosyncrasies. This is what I sometimes look like when I'm thinking these ideas. It may be gory, it may be interesting, it may be intuitive, it may be inexplicable to some, but that is what it looks like. And before leaving, I would like to actually end with something that I wrote as a learner in a classroom. Dawn is when I wake up to get ready for the day. With its own helter-skelter and all the unwanted banter, every day looks its own to me. Now I checked with those around, but there was a difference that they found. We sat on the ground to see how they found what they had found. When something touched our sight with a tad bit of fight, we all made sense that every day has a lens, arbitrary and ours to choose. And tomorrow, when I wake up at dawn to go through the day, tired maybe, this maybe is what I added later, with a sigh, I chose a lens, silence.
Thank you so much, Anusha. Our next speaker is an interdisciplinary designer and a reluctant entrepreneur who loves doing a variety of things. Her interests are driven by cross-culture interjections across design and architecture, traversing from education to practice, academia to management, Since 2011, she has been instrumental in initiating and running one of the India's first design thinking colleges called the Design Village with a vision to impact through design. Starting her career with the notable architecture firm Arcom, and as a partner at the studio, she handles a versatile portfolio that actively contributes to finding contemporary directions in Indian architecture. We are pleased to welcome Mridu Sahai on the stage.
Hello, I'm going to do a mic test. Check. Check, is it screeching? Darwin once said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one most adaptable to change." In our dynamic world, we have before us an uncertain future. Global temperatures are shattering records. There is ongoing unrest in the world. Technology is developing faster than our ability to assess and mitigate the harm it may create. In such a scenario, it helps to be an explorer, a juggler, a jack of all, a generalist rather than a specialist. And I want to tell you why. You will be surprised to know that even in the animal kingdom, animals have generalist and specialist species. Generalist species can eat a variety of food and live in a wide range of environmental conditions. Specialist species have dietary restrictions, habitat requirements. They find it hard to adapt. Yes, dinosaurs were specialists. Therefore, the metaphor, "don't become a dinosaur," comes frequently in management jargon, referring to the difficulties some organizations may face in adapting to new situations. Surprisingly, common generalists also include the cockroaches. Cockroaches are older than dinosaurs. They can eat anything, survive for a week without a head, and outlive humans. Yes, they will inherit the earth, as most scientists claim. They are omnivores, surviving both on animal and plant matter. So are we, human beings, the most successful species to have walked the planet. The roaches have led me to talk about the startup world. The past 12 months has seen a record-funded startups shutting down because of their lack of focus on long-term sustainability. Therefore, as the funding environment toughens, a startup's aspiration today should be to be a cockroach and not a unicorn. A cockroach startup is resilient, can survive through tough times, self-sustaining, even bootstrapped. Speaking of resilience, in the world of sports, the necessity of hyper-specializations forms the core of developing expertise. However, journalist David Epstein, in his book titled Range, has examined the world's most successful athletes and shares the story of the greatest of all time. He juggled multiple sports in his childhood, from skiing, swimming, handball, basketball, tennis, table tennis, and football. He was happy playing any sport in which a ball was involved. Later in his life, he acknowledged the range of sports he played had helped develop his athleticism and hand-eye coordination. This is the story of Roger Federer, who dominated tennis with his exceptional all-round game. Federer has been like the Swiss knife of tennis, excelling on grass, clay, hard surfaces alike. The greats have reminded me of the Indian Administrative Services, the IAS. They form the permanent bureaucracy of the Government of India. You will be surprised to know that IAS officers are encouraged to be generalists. Right from the rigorous examination they take to the broad range of skills they acquire at the academy, they are challenged to handle Murphy Law-like situations, making them exceptional administrators and leaders. As seen in the examples above, adaptability is key for sustainability. Versatility can lead to expertise, and having broad knowledge enables leadership. But this can also help us be more creative. The world has seen many creative polymaths: Leonardo da Vinci, Rabindranath Tagore, Steve Jobs, amongst others. Leonardo's genius was not just painting the Mona Lisa or the Last Supper. It was his universal curiosity. His expertise extended to architecture, science, music, math, anatomy, astronomy, and even paleontology. Tagore, the great Bengali polymath, was a multifaceted genius. Painter, poet, philosopher, social reformer, and musician, he gave India its national anthem. Steve Jobs was not a great coder, and he didn't think that technology alone could work. He was great at connecting the dots, and he imbibed arts and humanities with tech to create something truly special with Apple. Not limiting oneself to a particular silo helps to keep the mind creative, thinking out of the box by drawing connections across domains. Less of the same is more holds true even in the field of architecture and design that I operate in. Le Corbusier, Alvar Aalto, Charles Eames, P.V. Doshi have all been great generalists who were able to design across scales, from a city to a chair to a curriculum, with equal fervor. The overarching belief is that lateral thinking helps to see issues from new perspectives, leading to innovative solutions. When in college, I too pursued a career in leather design. It didn't take me long to realize that in today's conscious world, how would such a specialized education find relevance? In time, I would either be without a job or dabbling constantly with a moral dilemma. Therefore, motivated to be future-proof, I helped initiate an institute that enables a generalist, non-siloing learning in design, allowing students to traverse across domains to choose what is suitable for them. This platform is called the Design Village. Perhaps the most important lesson has been is to approach one's journey with a willingness to learn, unlearn, and relearn. The most important skill today is the ability to learn new ones. There is nothing wrong in developing expertise. We all tend to specialize in some depth or the other, but one must attempt to unravel the power of breadth. To be like a Swiss knife, the most useful in survival mode, to develop universal curiosity like Da Vinci, to be resilient like cockroaches, be versatile like Roger Federer, to understand the bigger picture like the IAS, and to be holistic designers capable of solving the wicked problems of the world and envisioning new futures. The future belongs to the most agile learner, the all-rounder. To conclude, I would like to share that the slur, jack of all trades, dates back to the 1500s. It was once hailed at a poet with no university tutelage, a young writer dabbling in all aspects of theatre, acting, copywriting, directing. His name was William Shakespeare. The entirety of the quote is still conveniently eliminated even today, and I would like to complete it for you. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mridu. Our next speaker is a boundary-pushing, multidisciplinary designer on a quest to explore every facet of creativity before declaring her true calling. With a bachelor's degree in architecture and a master's in graphics and communication, she embodies versatility and innovation in her approach to design. Currently working for a textile brand called The Shop, for her, the intersection of design disciplines is not a limitation but a source of boundless inspiration. In a world where specialization is often prized above all else, she stands as a testament to the power of diversity. She firmly believes that being proficient in multiple domains is not just beneficial but essential in today's era of rapid change and innovation. With every experience, she inches closer to finding her true calling. But until then, she will continue to embrace the joy of exploration and the thrill of the unknown. We are pleased to welcome Gunjana Kharbanda on the stage.
of us out of all of us. When I say this sentence, I'm sure most of us wants to be a part of some of us. Well, hello everyone, I'm Gunjana Kharbanda and I'm still figuring out where I belong. When I say figuring out, I mean doing everything and anything to see if I fit in and not just making notes of the things that I can do. I did my bachelor's in architecture, thought of getting a job in sustainable interior practices, then suddenly found the whole process of putting up a building together very lengthy, thought about pursuing product design, looking at my model making skills, and while I was going through all these options, I finally decided to do graphics, looking at my software skills. And mind you, by skills I mean I was convinced that I was pretty good at what I did. As a kid, when I came across people who inspired me, I used to put on a blindfold and start heading in the same direction, hoping I'd end up like them. Maybe during that time, graphic design was something that fascinated me the most, and I thought I'd try more things later. One thing that has led to this thought process of constant change in me is my curiosity of what all I can do. My favorite pastime is to observe how am I feeling when I'm engaged in a particular task. Is it making me forget about my phone? Is it making me more curious? But most importantly, am I enjoying what I'm doing? My parents and my friends still worry that as soon as I'm stable in my life, I'll just come up with another brilliant idea to run with. During my second year of architecture, I was convinced after watching Grey's Anatomy that I'd be a great doctor if given a chance. In my world, dreams are not just fantasies. They are blueprints for a life lived boldly and authentically, where every twist and turn is an opportunity to transform reality into something extraordinary. Every idea that pops up in my head is the best idea I could have ever had. It's a win-win mindset until an external force hits me with reality checks. There have been times when I realized that even if you're not happy doing something, you will have to do it for the sake of something. That could be earning money or finishing a project to get a degree, or you have invested so many years in doing one thing, how can you just start something else from scratch? Or simply because once you have started, you can't quit midway. The moment I felt that I was doing something because of those sakes and not because I wanted to do it, I ran away from it. And when I say ran away, I mean literally, physically gotten up and ran away. And if someone wants to see a perfect example of how reverse psychology works, they should study me. This doesn't mean that there were no consequences. Of course, I had to deal with being called a quitter, someone whom people can't trust, being called unreliable. But what it did to me was to find ways to quit things differently, with the least amount of physical and emotional damage. There was no way I would have stopped myself from exploring more in this vast field of design. The grass is always greener on the other side, fits pretty well in here. And I think this plays a huge role in motivating us to change. I still run away, but with a little more caution. I'm sure most of us have faced situations where there was an exit gate but we didn't take it. Why? Because there were a lot of sakes. Or maybe because we looked at them as exit gates and not entry gates to an expansion of our understanding as a designer. The times that we live in now have very high expectations of us. The older generations belong to a time where there were limited experiences and exposure, thus making them feel like they had to be the best at whatever they did and give their whole life to that. Now the times have changed, and with the kind of exposure one has of an extremely diverse world, we are unable to settle for just one thing. The idea of missing out has engulfed us, and it's a sentiment likely to only grow stronger with time. When I look at my journey to date and all the things I've tried, there is not a single regret of changing my decision and moving forward. Talking about multiple skills not only equips you with its knowledge, but also with the operational characteristics that comes with being in that environment. There is a huge difference in how a doctor, an engineer, an entrepreneur, or a designer lives their life, and how their capabilities reflect in the work they do. Yes, these differences are less prominent when we move around in areas that are closer to our field, such as architecture, graphic design, product design, and so on. But they are prominently present. I've made these transitions for myself a little less complicated by choosing areas of my interest that are on macro level connected to each other. This made my diverse journey more relatable and growth oriented. Let me paint you a picture of a stubborn yet a passionate quitter. I got this tattoo in 2021. In 2021, don't do things you don't like. Quite a simple line, but means the world to me. While we talk about trying new things and acquiring new interests, these emotions, or one can say motivation, emerge from a fear that if you don't switch right here, right now, this is what you're going to be for the rest of your life. You feel a sense of urgency, like you have to pee, or else your bladder will explode. And when you make yourself feel that the stakes are that high, you won't take any risk of staying put. It's like your life is dependent on it. And if you don't switch, you'll die. I'm not even exaggerating when I put this feeling across like this. This fear, if not acted upon, results in a lingering grief of what all I could have been. All this while, I was subjected to the notion that you don't care about your profession that much to stick around with one thing. But how I look at it is I love and care about my profession so much that I'm always in awe of the design world. I want to be a part of every idea, every process, and every outcome that comes with it. I want to know how a textile designer feels a cloth that evokes a certain emotion in them. I want to know how a graphic designer personalizes a brand that doesn't even belong to them. I want to be a part of the process where 100 iterations of a building are lying on the table with a massive lamp lit on top. I find these brains amusing and empowering. There is an abundance of knowledge to absorb, so why confine oneself to just one discipline? I crave for environments where more than one minds are colliding to bring to life one great idea. Once I develop an interest, I make myself obsessed, like a crazy stalker. Some people may say I'm not serious about my work just because they've met me during a time when I'm not engaged in their interested area. And I've learned my lessons and moved forward. Sure, you might not be able to go in the depths of a single thing, but that's the choice some of us have to make. You will not find the top architect or a graphic designer in me, but you'll come across someone who's been in diverse places and engaged with fascinating minds to put together a story that will not only be understood by designers alone, but by everyone and everything that surrounds them. And who knows, perhaps that's precisely what you've been seeking all along. In an overwhelming world of endless content generation, there is a need to become someone who comprehends it holistically. It's an ongoing journey for me to gravitate towards diversity. And I feel that is what is keeping me sane, the insanity of change. I don't encourage stability, and for the love of design, I encourage everything that takes you away from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunjana. So, for this very special day, we have prepared a small music performance for all of you present here. This performance is presented by first year students Anisha and Anjali from TDV. So, let's give them a round of applause and welcome them on the stage.
Hi everyone, thank you for having us today. I am Anisha Dubey.
And I'm Anjali.
So today we are going to perform Sham and Gileria, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
शाम भी कोई जैसे है नदी, लहर लहर जैसे बह रही है। कोई अनकही कोई अनसुनी बात धीमी धीमी कह रही है। शाम भी कोई जैसे है नदी, लहर लहर जैसे बह रही है। कोई अनकही कोई अनसुनी बात धीमी धीमी कह रही है। कहीं ना कहीं जागी हुई है कोई आरज़ू, कहीं ना कहीं खोए हुए से है।
Is his dictum in life, a life lived through design. Restless most time, he is always dreaming and doing. We are pleased to welcome Saurav Gupta on the stage.
Check. Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving, said Einstein. And of course, Steve Jobs. Stay hungry, stay foolish. These are all great life lessons. I have one too. Beg, borrow, steal, get the job done. I like provocation, and I like the discomfort in this phrase. This dictum has always been there as an icebreaker. It's like a wake-up call, a call that ensures responses, a conversation in action. I say, begging for wisdom, borrowing experience, and stealing time has always got the best chance to get the job done. This has been a mantra for walking the talk that has worked for me. In today's world of prolonged procrastination and data digestion, or perhaps one needs to call it digital diarrhea, let me dissect this from my lens for you all. Beg for wisdom fundamentally tells you to shed your inhibitions and stay a learner. Learn from anyone and learn anywhere. I simply travel. There are my designed expeditions to explore cities and cultures. We call them Arco Tours. Arco Tours are annual architecture tours at my studio where a bunch of us travel across the globe for 2 weeks. The Arco Tour is a detour in life to explore architecture and oneself. It ensures a conversation with your own self at one level and confronts your worldview at another. Traveling together with frugality and simplicity keeps us hungry for knowledge and open to exchange. One must read and, more importantly, reread. Rereading your interests makes sure you stay humble to excavate new meanings every time. I strongly believe we all have short memory, and it helps to press the reset button to stay focused on your North Stars. And so, one has to unlearn and relearn to stay relevant. Whether it's my young colleagues leading organizations or my children with their flair for technology, it's incredible how much you can learn from them. It's incredible how new ways of thinking and working are important. One needs to embrace change. Let's change the way we get wise. Borrowing experience comes from the basic reality of not reinventing the wheel. Life through design, as we call it, needs to be built through thought-through foundations for everything we do. Drink, eat, sleep, think. And it really helps to learn from legends. I have had the honor of working with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan a few times. I'm a big fan. And it's incredible to spend hours and days in the recording studio with him. His focus on practicing, on rehearsing, and attempting to still be the best version of himself and his art form is unnerving. One could see the depth one can get when you remove the width. I have called it the art of monotasking. A sharp focus on what you can do while doing it, and then doing just that at that point of time. It's hard. I'm a bit absent-minded, and that usually helps. One can easily zone out and deep dive and come back. And relearning this art of focus, was extremely reassuring. At our architecture practice, we call them archoforums, another take on exchange and experience. It's a forum that allows us to collaborate with the best international practices of the world. When our projects go beyond our scale and sensibility, it's important to be careful and critical. When one is confronted with the responsibility to landscape an entire heritage city, or have the power to rebrand a world wonder, one has to remember, with power comes responsibility. This is when resources warrant a careful treading to build in public realm as an architect in India. One must build on others' experiences. It is when been there, done that masters need to be heard before you speak a solution. One must master the experience from the best. I enjoy reading autobiographies. I'm always curious about people and their trajectories as to how they find time to do it all. Any name worth its weight, from Gandhi to Einstein, from Jobs to Musk, from Corbusier to Doshi, not a single one stays in bed past 6 in the morning. It's a non-negotiable. Waking up early gives you time for yourself, time to do everything you stretched or strived for. I have had no television in my house ever. It really helps to free time to think and do things. One would be lost occasionally in a friendly conversation of soaps in school days, but the extra time to play sports was well worth it. And now, my children have been brought up with just music and books. I do not have social media in my life. I don't have it on my machines. I don't have it on my phone or my laptop. I take updates as if it's a weekly regular job with my colleagues. I stay away from these super seductive reels and random connections to try and focus on rational and real ones. Rather than nibbling away from small habits and things, one must make a few decisions that can free up potentially a large amount of time on a schedule. It perhaps comes with a small degree of compromise and a fairly large degree of courage, but the benefits far outweigh everything else, always. It's the time you can easily steal out of your own life. With these traits, getting the job done needs the will to go the distance. I share two stories for this. We were asked by the state to look at the old city of Agra, Tajganj, the area around Taj Mahal. It needed a facelift for a better visitor experience. We extended our brief to make the city a key stakeholder. There were 11 owners to Taj Mahal, from UNESCO internationally to the Archaeological Survey of India to the local development authorities and municipal corporations of Agra. We wanted to pedestrianize and clean the city. One of the main ideas were to remove the black tarmac on all the roads of the city and thereby avoid the annual polluting relayering of Agra. We wanted to bring the original stone, the red stone, to cobble on the streets, a solution that could put the monument off its misery forever. No one seemed interested in authorizing this. One had to go to the Supreme Court of India to argue this as our case, and we won. It was something beyond the brief of an architect and way beyond the brief of a design practice. My second story. is my journey of building a design school, the Design Village. Every entrepreneur in India will agree that the most fundamental challenge in running their show, their shop, is the people they work with. I too experienced this. I also saw the biggest reason for me being able to work creatively was my exposure and education. And thus began the journey of bringing the relevant design world to India, as one could not have taken every student out. The Design Village is a school for the future and a school for the world. It was started with gut and grit, very little sense, or rather business sense. When in doubt, jump, and that is exactly what we did to now make India's first social design school, a school to change the world. And to be able to beg humbly, borrow carefully, and steal with prudence, it gives one the appetite to go the distance. And to be able to travel these personal journeys, we equip ourselves with the tools that make this magic happen for us. The proof of the pudding is in eating it, but the magic is in the proofing. The magic is in finding ways, these inconvenient ways, these provocative ways, so our dreams wire through to light our life. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. Our next speaker. In the vast landscape of architecture, she is always eager to explore beyond the confines of convention. Her journey began in the first house of India, where she first embraced architecture beyond blueprints. Now, at Studio Arcom, her multifaceted skills in design and architecture extend to communications, research, branding, narrative, and publications. Not content with traditional boundaries, she also spearheads Detours India, intertwining design and travel to inspire new perspective. Her never settle for less attitude makes her what she is today. We are pleased to welcome Akanksha Thapa on the stage.
Do I look nervous? This is my mic test. Norman Foster said, I think you never stop learning. As you all have dedicated your Sunday morning, I would like to express my gratitude by sharing some of the personal architectural dialogues, unconventional journeys, as I'm still trying to find home in the unexpected. In today's world, where architects are known to be maven, I knowingly chose to carve my way out into an unorthodox approach for myself, as I refuse to confine myself in the constraints of conventional architecture. Do you know, according to the survey by LinkedIn, 35% professionals change their career every 5 years. In today's fast-paced world, staying stagnant is no longer an opinion. Instead, we must embrace the change. To me, the essence of being an architect transcends from mere execution of design. It demands mastery over the quota of other skills too. Hence, I embarked on the journey that surpasses the confines of blueprint drafting. Closer to home, when you think about that neighbor who might be a teacher by profession, but also a magician, a painter, or a volunteer for a local shelter. His multifaceted approach to life enriches not only his experience, but also for those around him. In this era of paradigm shift, the scope of architecture seems to define a linear categorization. Architecture extends far beyond the blueprints and structures. As architects, they are visionaries who breathe dreams into tangible forms, shaping not just the buildings but also the urban fabric. Reflecting back to the time in 2014, the point where my trajectory as a conservation architect took a gradual curve. It is then when I realized that I got a call from my thesis guide
encouraging me to apply for a research architecture position. Research architecture back then was not a common thing, intruded by the rebellious notion of research architecture. I dared to embrace upon uncertainty and applied for the position. Later, when I got a selection call, I was then briefed about my police qualification. That's when I realized that the job was for the President of India. New windows of newer horizons opened for me. The work transcended from mere architecture. It became narratives of architecture, design, history, and research. Picture a 22-year-old girl being around the President, conducting research for the first citizen of India. Accumulation of this chapter, I saw the release of 13 books in March 2007. This was the first time when I chose unconventional. Post this, propelled by my dear friend Francis, who encouraged me to explore more in the diversity of architecture and bioed me to join an architectural organization. This professional journey of an architect involves navigating beyond the traditional practices, demonstrate the power of design by communication, the holistic approach of storytelling. It started with all kinds of jobs, nearly get the job done, or finish off the projects that were brushed under the carpet. In this world of doom scrolling, my job was to convey pedagogy to practice. Continuing this quest of innovation, I led to meaningful endeavors and curated design and architectural travel itineraries for architects and designers. This expedition contributed to the accumulation of architectural dialogues and discussions to inspire a lot of architects. The art is in architecture or architecture is in art. Then in 2019, I really wanted to explore more. I explored more. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I have found 10,000 ways that won't work." At that time, I went into the business aspect of the institute. However, it did not work for me. But today, as I stand here, I know 10,000 ways of why it did not work for me. Nevertheless, stepping outside the norm, realization that dawned upon me was a lesson that your experience holds so much more significance as your degree. What you do today or what you have done is seemingly and equally important. This led to me realizing that oblivion is a bliss, but definitely an opportunity. Defining a niche in the process, and it takes years to pass for one attempts to do so. Your journey as an architect is a collection of those turns and curves that you chose to hurdle upon. Being a communication architect, I am still trying to define a niche for myself because every inch in my body is screaming, never settle for less. Never settle for less in the terms of curiosity. Like, saying a journey of being a researcher turned me into a person who wants to narrate architecture, also do architectural exhibition, and the list goes on and on. I completely believe that architects are the guardians of built environment, tasked with the balancing demand of present and a legacy what we leave for the future generation. And everything that takes up in between strengthens the cause more and more if done mindfully. It's so much more than brick and mortar. It is about narratives and dialogues. Today, I stand here harboring grand aspirations, yet grounded. For failure is not a detriment, but a stepping stone towards growth. I advocate for each celebration of an individuality. As my people look upon me with pride, I pledge to continue the journey with unwavering compassion and dedication. Steve Jobs once said, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them while you look backward." As I conclude, I urge you to reflect on your own blueprints. What path will you carve for yourself? What dreams will you chase? Remember, it's okay. It's okay to not have an answer. For sometimes, it's the journey itself that leads to the greater destinations. Thank you.
Thank you, Akansha. A last speaker of the day is a neurodivergent interaction designer and a dancer embodying an entrepreneurial mindset who thrives at the intersection of creativity and functionality. Currently designing at Innovator, a health tech unicorn, he has over 4 plus years of industry experience and a track record of crafting intuitive, delightful, and scalable interfaces by leveraging creative and data driven insights. His compulsion to shoot ideas and relentless pursuit of validation underscore his collaborative approach. A strong blend of his quest for excitement, emphasis on frugality, and a passion for storytelling, combined with an admiration for human values, drive him to design dynamic experiences that are impactful and deeply human. We are pleased to welcome Akash Goyal on the stage.
As a person who's suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is like your brain's browser having 50 odd tabs open, wanting attention all at once, I was drawn to design from very early on. This was because of the sheer flexibility in the outlet for creativity design offered. While pursuing design in my higher studies, I remember getting an assignment of mine torn to shreds for not being at par with the expected standards, which is true for any design student's rite of passage. As a somewhat direct response to that incident, I developed an inner critic which would set high standards of perfection, possibly so that I wouldn't have to face rejection like that ever again. Perfectionism became a mechanism to compensate, but was merely a way to hide the imposter within. If self-doubt had a toxic Indian parent, it would be known as the imposter syndrome, as it is always nagging you for never being good enough, instilling a fear in you that failure is not an option, and pushing you to strive for unachievable perfection. It makes you forget whatever good you've achieved in the past because look at what Sharmaji's data has done today. This is precisely why I feel imposter syndrome is especially sinister in the creative fields, as there's no objective sense of a perfect design, Helvetica side, and where creativity is as subjective as the idea of pineapples on pizza. Now, as a practicing designer, the most frustrated individuals I meet are creative people who have not allowed themselves to create. It's because the imposter in them has sown in the very seeds of self-doubt, making them suffer because of it. It takes away our ability of enjoying our process. It destroys our very ability of self-expression because it makes us believe that in order to be taken seriously, our work needs to be pixel perfect. It needs to be validated by others and without any criticism. At the beginning of a design process, we very often use online platforms for inspiration and ideation. However, an imposter's toxic trait quickly has us using that as a mechanism to compare ourselves unfairly against somebody else's definition of success. Consequently, the modern design landscape is rife with triggers that feed into our very insecurities and fears. A few years ago, I remember I was privileged enough to be part of a summer design workshop in the southern France. I was surrounded by artists, architects, and designers from across the globe. But I distinctly remember feeling like the black sheep amongst the bunch, merely disguising myself as the contemporary equal, always second-guessing my very place in the crowd at every instance. The imposter in me had made me hesitant to ask questions on things I was genuinely curious about. I withdrew from active participation and even refrained from sharing my work with others, fearing as they may expose me as the comic sans of the community. You see, I mistook their flawless execution of skill and effortless use of medium as a cultural barrier that I could not cross, or a God-given talent that I did not possess. A particularly embarrassing moment I remember in great detail is asking Pablo, a designer my age, how he was able to charge so much for his designs. Because, you see, my very humbling impostor had drafted my rate cards. It became evident that the true barrier to my growth, learning, and frankly even bank balance at this point was this fraud-like feeling within. Ironically, the more time I spent there interacting, the clearer it got that the imposture, which I thought was part of my unique, troubled and edgy personality, was not a feeling uncommon to others. These gurus whom I had worshipped as faultless turned out to be rather guides and friends who willingly shared their lengthy journey of learning, of being an amateur, and refreshingly of their struggles with self-doubt. A reputed study by American psychologist Gail Matthews suggested a number as high as 70% of successful people experiencing imposter-like feelings during some point of their lives, which I still take as a silver lining example for myself posted in my room. Now, back in India, I got a call from a friend asking if I'd been interested in making NFTs for a Bollywood movie with an A-lister in it, having Big B in his name. Naturally, with impeccable timing, my imposter returned. And for the right reasons this time. I had no ideas on how to make NFTs, not that it's relevant anymore. I was way over my head for a project this size, and I only considered it because my friend insisted on me being the right fit, and frankly, I was just too embarrassed to say no. It was made crystal clear to me by my imposture that I was set to fail. So, without nothing to lose except perhaps the respect of the said friend, I made the first draft without thinking much of it. I even had a little bit of fun along the process and sent it without thinking. To my absolute disbelief, the team loved the draft and commissioned me for not one but the entire 50 NFTs for the project. My imposter having a hard time feeling and clueless, I let out a big nervous laugh as my friend said nothing except I told you so. In hindsight, my groundbreaking approach to this entire ordeal was that helped me deliver the entire NFTs was how you'd save any dying relationship. That is to spice things up with roleplay. Instead of feeling like I was merely pretending to be a good designer, for the sake of my friend's delusion, I decided to be good at just the pretending part for the moment. This simple change in perspective helped me find newfound confidence that helped me stay grounded and focus on the task at hand. Mind you, feeling confident didn't mean that I had eliminated all self-doubt. Rather, it had made me act confident despite the uncertainties. Through this roleplay, or as my therapist likes to call it, unblending, I was able to externalize the imposture from myself. My imposture had previously made me so output-focused that I had forgotten to enjoy the creative journey. I started to appreciate the importance of process and progress over perfection. The feeling that would make me freeze and often procrastinate first now became something stimulating. As a reminder to myself and to all of you, I emphasize that it's the very mistakes our imposter wants us to avoid that leads to discoveries, and the very play we're so afraid to indulge in that leads to passionate, exciting work. It might seem unnatural at first, but if we create a design that is outside some standard norms or might not appeal to others, is perfectly fine. And the feeling when the client is not appreciating the design is in no way an indication of your capability and competence. We need to remember why we're doing what we're doing in the first place. And that is for the absolute joy of creating, of problem solving, of making something new, of drafting a new experience. If we see our mistakes as opportunities for growth rather than reasons for shame, we can flip the script on an imposter with a well-timed Uno reverse. Friends who volunteer I told you so's are also to be protected, as it is individuals like them who help us build a culture and community where every artist feels confident, capable and authentically themselves. My non-toxic mother said this, and I quote, "Having the right mindset is half the battle won. Therefore, to separate and manage the impostor, we first need to acknowledge it, and then cultivate our cycle of positivity, designing confidence. We can simply do this by acting as if we believe in something, which may pave the way to truly believing it, and thus achieving it." Thank you so much.
Come Abir for the thank you note.
I would like to thank the amazing audience that we had today. The family members of the speakers who are here to show support and love. Thank you so much. And of course, an applause for all our amazing speakers here today. We would also like to thank TDV, Arcom, Alliance Francaise for giving us this platform. It would not have been possible without you. Thank you. And finally, Thank you to the production team at Alliance Francaise. And can we have a round of applause for the amazing volunteer team that we have here today? It would not have been possible without you guys. You have been here day and night for the last 2 days. Congratulations, this is on you. Thank you for my team who have been working on this since November last year. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you here. Good afternoon. Thank you. You can now, please, the snacks are served outside.